Welcome to another episode of The Neophytes, a special series within the Never Close the Inquiry podcast, wherein my good friend Thomas Maybe and I sit down and talk about current issues in politics. We are not experts, neither of us, and that's kind of the whole point. If we repeated our conversation today with the benefit of more time to think things through, it would be different, maybe in small ways and maybe in big ways. The message we're trying to convey is that it's okay not to know. It's okay to keep learning, and it's okay to change your mind. In fact, it's probably good. The fact that you believed something before doesn't mean that when presented with new information or upon reconsideration, you're still locked into that prior view. It's okay, in other words, to never close the inquiry. All right. So, welcome back to the Neophytes.
Here we are.
I'd ask you how you've been. I think that's conventional on podcasts, except that we've seen each other, I think, rather a few times since we last recorded.
Yeah. I mean, we've had our fans have been reaching out to us nonstop to do another podcast.
Our mini fan, has been reaching out almost nonstop. Yeah. Yes. Correct. So we were going to start today. Well, first we should a brief note for our sponsors. Today we're sponsored by water, by H2O plus whatever minerals the city of Salt Lake puts into the water that comes out of our fridge,
and not fluoride.
Yeah, maybe not fluoride anymore. I don't know when that.
I don't know
out of our
either.
water.
But it's a thing.
I noticed my teeth have been rotting.
It's already began.
But I'm getting smarter.
Oh, hey, well, the trade-offs, you can't have everything.
Is that I think that's what theoretically that's what it's supposed to do.
I don't know.
Okay. It's like our teeth will be worse because we don't have the fluoride or enough fluoride, but we'll be smarter because fluoride makes us dumb.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that people were already starting to plan about how to counteract not having it anymore. So plans to now that we don't have fluoride, what are we going to do to help kids' teeth? And it's well,
we're going to dental school.
You could just keep it in.
The fluoride in the water?
Yeah. And then you wouldn't have to think about alternative measures, but
that would have been one way to play it.
But maybe Utah will just be the first and every other state will follow. Who knows? I know another state did at some point.
I feel like Florida's always flirting with it.
Yeah, it probably was Florida that actually came in after us.
Also could be thinking of that because fluoride sounds a lot like Florida, but I think it actually might be Florida.
Well, it fits.
Yeah. Anyway, we're both drinking water today, so maybe we'll lose a lot of energy as the podcast goes along because we don't have our normal.
Yeah, because I'm usually very energized.
Yes.
And hyper throughout the podcast.
Yes, you are known for that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what we wanted to start out with was a brief recap of big recent news, and then kind of talk about it and it kind of branch off. And now, one thing to note, as I'm recapping this recent news, we are coming at this from the perspective of the neophytes. So a lot of this information this is a very brief summary. It's not complete. And if you want complete information, this particular podcast is probably not where you should get it.
Yeah, this is more of, I don't know what's happening, and so Hagen has to tell me what's happening.
And then
because I'm feeling overwhelmed and not quite sure what's happening all over the world now because of all the different conflicts and laws and people getting arrested and protests and shootings and
oh gosh, yeah.
There's just a lot of unrest perhaps, and I don't know if it's over exaggerated and people are screaming, "Oh, World War III, blah blah blah." I don't feel that level, but it's kind of okay, well, there seems to be a lot of unrest going on. Is this just the media portraying it this way, or am I just seeing these things personally and the things that I'm looking at, and they're coming up a lot.
Yeah, no, that's honestly a good question, I think, because well, let's put it this way. I think over our lifetimes, and so, I'm born at the end of 89, you're born in 90, our lifetimes have been pretty dang peaceful if you look at like this period relative to prior periods. And also, we were born in the United States, which is a pretty solid place in which to be born. We were born in Utah, which I think among the 50 United States is a relatively peaceful state, which you can be born. And so I think, people tend to get a little myopic looking at the current moment and saying that it's more, there's more stuff happening than there really might be if you look at things compared to historical periods. But then at the same time, I actually do think there's a fair amount happening right now.
Well, it's kind of similar to so skin cancer's on the rise in quotations, and so some people are like, oh well, it's the sunscreen. The sunscreen that we're wearing is giving us skin cancer. Whereas the other factors may be that we're diagnosing it more. People just in the past just died, and it's like, okay, they died.
Right.
But now it's like, oh, they died of skin cancer. Okay, there's one more. And then and then people are getting older.
Yep.
And so you're out in the sun more, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So it's not that the violent stuff is rising, but it's being reported and we're seeing it more often. But yeah, it's not, I don't know if I'm scared, but I'm just like a little like weary about what's happening and don't know. It just feels like the next 3.5 years might be longer than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah. Well, and I would say, and maybe, I'm saying this coming from more of, from the left side of the aisle, but
weird.
Yeah, weird. But the last 5 months of the Trump administration have felt like rather long months. There's been a lot happening. And granted, I'm paying in some ways more attention to it than I might normally, given that I'm now writing about it.
Yeah.
And talking about it, but it does feel like a lot has happened, and it's what Trump does. There's a ton of back and forth, and then there's all this other stuff happening that is not.
Yeah, well, what's
Trump.
concerning really is that for someone that I don't go out of my way to avoid it, but I don't seek it out, and I've been inundated. That's a word, right?
That's a great word. Yeah,
it's just been a constant presence the last months or so, like basically since Trump got in.
Yep.
Biden, while Biden was in, it was like, there's nothing like and I'm not saying that's good at all.
Right.
Like, if anything, I'm saying it's bad, but like it didn't seem like he did anything. Just from some guy that's sitting here talking on a podcast, like, it didn't seem like anything happened.
Well, and okay, so a couple of different ways to look at this, because I think much more happened in Biden's first year than in the last 3. So in the first one, when he has both houses of Congress, and they're going to use budget reconciliation so they can get stuff passed with just 50 votes, and then Afghanistan, the withdrawal was 2021. There was a lot that happened in Biden's first 8 months.
True.
A little bit that happened the next year, and then, with the filibuster and everything, there's just not a lot that Congress can do if you don't have, certainly if you don't have both houses. And so over the last couple of years of the Biden administration, Congress is kind of handicapped, and that handicaps the president. And so really, and then the president actually was like
was probably handicapped as well.
maybe. And so not a lot happened.
I saw you wanting to say that, but you weren't.
I was really thinking about it.
I said it for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
So people can cancel you and not me. But or maybe we'll get very popular with Republicans.
Gosh.
There we go.
Not anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, now that we're saying it out loud, no. But I think we could see that same pattern happen again, where a lot happens because it's the first year of the Trump presidency. A fair amount happens next year. And then over the last 2 years, assuming Republicans lose the House, which I do continue to think is likely, a lot less happens because you can't get anything through Congress without Democratic support. But a lot has happened recently, since we last met. A lot happened over the weekend before that. So just to run through this briefly. So we had the immigration-related protests that were going on. Those started because a week and a half ago, from when we're talking now, ICE raids in Los Angeles led organically to some protests, which to a degree, some people got a little out of hand, some people didn't. The protests started to spread across the country. ICE has been taking aggressive tactics that seem a little underhanded, I think, or maybe a lot underhanded. It's not the raiding workplaces, I think, so much, although that definitely bothers a lot of people on the left. It's more the arresting people when they come for their scheduled court appearances or kind of induce them to come in and then just arrest them. That puts people that are here without documentation, I think, in a pretty serious bind.
Yeah, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't type of thing.
Exactly. And there is a coherent reason to do that, even if it does seem underhanded, the administration, because they're trying to drive people out. There are major downsides to that, and now Trump, has talked about ICE no longer doing raids, at least on some sorts of businesses. They're not going to raid farms and hotels, I believe. And one of the interesting things I think about politics in general, but particularly about President Trump, is that they, speaking of politicians generally, tend to take reasonably seriously the concerns of which they are made aware by people that actually talk to them physically, which is why, lobbyists and large companies and organizations will pay lots of money to speak to politicians directly, because then politicians kind of react. So why is he taking special care to change ICE's approach for farms and hotels and whatnot? Well, maybe he knows. I think his agriculture secretary is really pushing hard for those businesses, those types of businesses, particularly farms. I don't know. I assume hotels don't fit under that umbrella, but maybe, it's Donald Trump. He knows he has hotels. He knows a bunch of hoteliers. So maybe he's hearing from friends, whatnot. When the government does stuff and then makes exceptions to the stuff that it does,
a very specific area.
You tend to be able to track it back, and it's like, that's some like personal interest, or they know friends. It's crony capitalism.
Well, I guess part of the risk of the approach of just raiding and doing things that you can't really quite expect is if you feel like no matter what you do, you're screwed. I'm not surprised when some people act out violently in some way. I'm not surprised I see cop cars on fire with a Mexican flag waving behind it.
Yeah.
It looks like it's from like some civil war in a country in South America or something, or Central America.
Yeah.
And I think that's the risk you run if you corner people in a way where it's like, well, I can't do it the official way, and now that I'm here, I don't want to leave. And some people feel like they have to do something about it. I don't think that's the right way to go, but I understand why people feel that way.
I think those sorts of images, that sort of reaction, if the president and if they don't want that, I think they do, because I think it helps them.
Yeah.
Like that, if Trump is doing, these raids, the raids are generally, I think, unpopular by and large. They're popular with some, but I think they're less popular with more. When you get images like that, and you get a fellow standing with the Mexican flag on top of a burning, a driverless Waymo car in Los Angeles, Waymo taxi cab, these, fully robotic taxi cabs.
Uh-huh.
I think I think people really dislike seeing that sort of thing, and that's how you get more people on board with this. Like, yeah, let's get them all out.
Yeah.
But then economically, lay aside the human side of it for a minute, because I think people get really, really focused in on that for understandable reasons. Economically, it's not good, which is why we're walking the policy back with farms and hotels and whatnot. These illegal immigrants, it's not like they're just a bunch of people running amok in our cities, burning cars and waving the flags of their.
You mean they're not all criminal rapists eating our pets?
No. I am some percentage of them are indeed criminal rapists. I think it's a lower percentage than of the native-born population, according to all data we have. I don't know if anyone is actually eating pets. I know food customs vary country to country. So, yeah, I don't want to plant a flag on no immigrant has ever eaten someone's pet, because then one example of a crazy guy that eats someone's parakeet or whatever, it rebuts that argument. Don't want to do that. But by and large, immigrants, including those who are here without documentation, are employed and over time become members of their respective communities. They contribute, their kids go to school here and all that. And they also largely congregate in places where there are jobs. It's not like you're sitting in Mexico and you're like, this sucks. I really want to go to the U.S. Now I got all these 50 states that I could pick from. Where is really economically blighted? Like, West Virginia's peak economically was probably some time ago. That's where I should go. It's like, that's not what they're doing. No, you go to, big cities, Los Angeles, New York, you go to Texas, these are places that have a bunch of other undocumented immigrants. So, it might be easier to assimilate, undocumented and documented, I should say, who speak your native language. It's an easier place to assimilate. But then also, like, you have reasonable prospect of employment. In California, you got all these great farms. You got a ton of businesses in the cities. There's this, this argument. I wrote about this, but there's this argument on the immigration restrictionist right. You don't see much of this. You don't see nearly as much of this now on the left, and then a lot of the right is fairly pro-immigration. But there's this part of it. Trump does represent them. I think he's not as much of a true believer as some of his employees are. Stephen Miller, who's his Homeland Security advisor, is a big anti-immigration guy. I think Vance leans this direction, although I also question.
I'm not sure where he leans on stuff.
Yeah, hard to say. Hard to say. I mean, hard to say with politicians.
Which is I was about to say that's the sign of a good politician.
Yeah,
if you can't really say exactly what their position is.
Yeah, I understand why people don't like Vance, but I think he's very smart. I think certainly in the last election cycle, I think he was the intellectual standout of the four that were on the presidential tickets. And he's made some of these arguments before, but there's this idea that by expelling and deporting or inducing to self-deport a bunch of these undocumented immigrants that are currently working low-wage jobs here, that you will then open those jobs up for native-born Americans who are out of the workforce, and that you will also kind of or you will drive employers to raise wages because they'll need to attract Americans to take those jobs that are not currently willing to take those jobs. And you can see, like, the argument makes sense in the sense that you can follow it, but in practice, I don't find it very convincing, in large part because the places where you have the highest percentages of native-born Americans out of the workforce are in places that don't have a lot of employment opportunities. West Virginia, Mississippi. Like the share of people that are either working or trying to work, that share is lower there than it is in California, New York, North Dakota, Utah. And then you go, but those places that have, a bunch of people out of the workforce, they also have very few immigrants because people aren't coming in and saying, we will go to Mississippi and make our fortune. Like, no, they're going to a state that seems like it has jobs. And so you go to the states that have jobs. We live in one of them. Utah has a very high employment, or a very high workforce participation rate. All things considered, despite having, I think, a lower percentage of women in the workforce than many other states. But there are a lot of jobs here. So we do have, I think, a relatively, I'm not sure, we have a decent number of immigrants. Not as many as like California or Texas or Illinois or New York. These places of kind of first entry or truly really massive cities. But people are going to where there are jobs, and where there are jobs, you have a higher workforce participation rate anyway. So so getting rid of the immigrants, what it seems like it would do, it just leaves businesses without anyone to hire because everyone that was looking for a job has a job.
Yeah. Well, I understand a little bit about this. So when Joe Biden came in, he did allow more illegal immigrants in than previous.
So
because I've seen graphs. I don't know. I know how misrepresented those can be, but
sure.
I saw that there was quite a large increase while he was in, and then the idea was, well, we'll let him in, and then we'll decide later whether or not we'll keep them or something. Like there's like kind of a vague, like, we'll deal with this later, and now it's later.
Yeah, I look at it a little differently. So, 'cause I think part of it is policy, but a much larger part of it is messaging. And the message, in some senses, might be downstream of like ICE policy. But I think that they're two distinct things. So there were some things that Biden did policy-wise that increased the number of migrants. So I think we took in more people from like Haiti and Venezuela on parole, which is like a temporary status where it's like you're coming in, it's indefinite, you're going to be able to work, but this doesn't necessarily put you on a path to permanent residency, and we're going to leave it there. And it is kind of this, I don't know, temporary suspended sort of thing that
that's kind of weird.
It is kind of weird. It's kind of weird. But then there's another part of it. So you have those people, and that's a relatively, I mean, it's a large number of people, but it's relatively limited. But then you have a ton of people, far more, coming over the border. And I think that's less policy and more people that are in other countries thinking they're not doing anything to me if I get in.
So Sleepy Joe getting elected is like, okay, well, we can get into the country now because they don't really care. And now that Trump's in office and is kicking everyone out, it's like, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't go.
So
is that what you're saying?
Basically, yeah. So let's go. And by the way, we will at some point get back and get through the news of this last weekend. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in theory. So go back a little bit to Obama. Okay, and you do have immigrants coming in. You have a lot of, you have the same sort of back and forth between the sides on immigration then as you do now. I do think that there were fewer people coming in under Obama than under Biden. So what happens when Trump comes in? Trump runs on a fairly quite anti-immigration platform, or certainly anti-illegal immigration platform. The most anti-illegal immigration platform in a long time. Mm-hmm. And because this is where you get into this idea of polarization and it making us just a little bit dumber, I think, to an extent. So because Trump has this, set of policies, set of priorities, and because it's Trump, Democrats, I think, go a little more opposite him than you might against someone less offensive.
Uh-huh.
So if like Mitt Romney says, I'm a little skeptical about immigrants coming in, this way, it's you would have some sort of reaction to that, and you might take a different position, but it might not be quite as much of a life or death sort of thing, and might not be quite as polar opposite a position.
Yeah, I would have thought that kind of gut reaction would be watered down at some point, but it feels like everything that comes out of his mouth is just pissing someone off.
It's funny
to like an extreme. Like it's like everything he does.
Yeah,
and not talking about me. I'm just talking about.
Yeah,
somebody is like upset to like the highest order at every single thing
I
that
think
happens.
It's funny, yeah, people on the right that like him, so we'd say the reaction to him is just stronger going both ways. So you have people that like him that are like, they support him to a far greater degree than anyone has ever supported, Bill Clinton or George Bush. Like there are not a ton of people that are like, yeah, I'd die for George Bush. Whereas people that are like, I really think Donald Trump is, laying the groundwork for the second coming. There's, something like some really, I don't know, strong reaction. But so when Democrats, start the 2020 primary process, there is this giant push to be really pro-immigrant. And when we're talking pro-immigrant, we're not really talking about expanding pathways to legal immigration.
Yeah.
We tend to be talking about treatment of undocumented migrants, particularly those already here, and even those that are on their way, so to speak. And Biden was less immigrant friendly than a number of his competitors in that primary, but he's certainly much more immigrant friendly than Trump, and all the the Democratic party push is going that direction. And so, I think people are just like, I'm going to give it a go. This seems like a way better idea now than when Trump was in charge. He seemed to not like me, and this guy seems to kind of like me. And so, like, the high point of border encounters, and we can, obviously there are people getting through that ICE doesn't catch. So we have to use border encounters as a proxy. These are the people they're actually tagging in some way. And the number peaked at 249,000, I think, in December 2023. So that's a 250
for a month?
For a month. Yeah.
Wow.
So 250,000 people. And granted, some of those might have come and then, been tagged, and they had to go back to Mexico or wherever, and then they try again. So maybe you're double counting some people, but I would imagine it's a relatively small percentage. That number dropped. It has dropped. It was 8,400 in April of this year. People just stopped coming. And I think that is a huge part of why a lot of people on the right still, despite maybe disagreeing with some of what Trump is doing economically, or despite disagreeing with some of what he's doing on immigration, generally support what he has done on immigration. Because on that top priority item, people coming over the border, it has been slashed to zero. And I think a relatively small percentage of that is actual policy. It's mostly messaging.
So success then?
Well, it depends on your perspective.
Success for Trump?
So on that thing,
if
yes,
if you voted for Trump because you were worried about the influence of a lot of illegal immigrants coming in,
and I think that's a lot of people,
then that would be like, okay, good job.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much
at this point, anyways.
What's happening? Yeah, and that kind of is what makes immigration really hard, because what I just wrote about, I think a ton of these Republicans, including those who voted for Trump because of immigration-related issues, they don't actually want to deport every undocumented migrant that's here. Obviously, everyone is fine with deporting criminals. That's great. There are like, you rape somebody, we all make mistakes. No, there's nothing like that. It's like if someone did something bad, you want them out of the country. I think there's broad support for that on the left. And then there are also a lot of people, I think somewhere up, like it might be seven figures of people that have already been through the immigration court process, have an active deportation order against them, but have not been deported yet for some, I presume, logistical reason. Gavin Newsom was talking about this the other day, but you do have support, I think, even in Democratic states, or maybe it's begrudging support, but I think genuine support for getting rid of criminals and people with active deportation orders, but not like families and grandmas and kids that are in elementary school, or the parents of kids that are in elementary school and that sort of thing. But then if you have some version of amnesty for those people that are here, one, you can't say that word because we've done that before, and even if you think it was the right policy, it over the long term, I think did not have the effect that some of its proponents were hoping for, which is basically where you have amnesty for the people that are already here and then you shut the border down. What generally happens is you have amnesty and then more people keep coming in. And so the question is kind of how you manage to treat the people here humanely and in a way that makes sense for the U.S. economy and the various communities of which these people are a part, that also does not encourage the widespread continued illegal immigration that people are so opposed to.
Is there any data on how much immigration is good or bad for America specifically, but just in other countries? Like, is there a target percentage that Pence would want to hit, or Vance would want? Like, is there?
It's a really good question. I don't think there is data that responds to that exact question. So I asked that question of Professor Ezekiel Hernandez of the University of Pennsylvania, who wrote a book called The Truth About Immigration: Why Successful Societies Welcome Newcomers. So he wrote this book. I have it somewhere on my shelf. But wrote it, came out last year, and it basically makes an economic argument for fairly generous immigration policies, with the basic argument being that legal immigration is to our immense economic benefit, and so even is illegal immigration. And that's not a justification for illegal immigration, but it is a justification for dramatically, if you are going to shut the border down, especially dramatically expanding legal pathways to legal immigration.
So the arguments for doing it, are these economic? What is he saying is good? Like, if immigrants are coming in, when you say it's better for us, what does that mean?
Sure. So, well, now you're putting me on the spot. Don't remember everything, but basic gist is that we innovate much more quickly and well when we are bringing in more people. So what they've been able to track is that companies that are run by both domestic-born and foreign-born people tend to file for patents at a surprisingly higher rate. Foreign-born inventors patent stuff at a much higher rate, and yeah, it's a lot of stuff like that. I don't remember the rest of the arguments, but it was pretty good. And then also that even illegal immigrants over the course of 3 generations come out to a net positive in terms of taxes paid minus services taken from the government.
Okay.
So it's kind of like that, the economic contribution. But I don't know what the economic contribution averages for someone that's native born. I don't remember everything in the book. It's a few hundred pages. Very good book.
Why don't we just we make all of the illegal immigrants in charge of immigration? And then like, is this a problem? Is this a problem that money can solve? Like, what
do you mean?
So, if from my point of view, the Democrats are saying we're not letting enough people in, and we're not letting enough people in legally. And on the right, there's various levels of we have too many. We need to stop everything altogether. Like
So
if we had more money to pay people to get the process going for more people to come in, would that have avoided this issue? Or
you're saying the process to come in, we have this bottleneck because we don't have enough like federal workers to process applications?
I mean, that's what it sounds like.
So, I mean, part of this, that actually probably is true. We don't have nearly enough immigration judges.
Like I know people are just going to come, no matter what.
Yeah.
But it just seems like a problem where it's just going to be eternal. Like it's just going to repeat.
Yeah. So a few things. Let's see. Okay.
Maybe we lower the standard of living to the point.
That's a good idea.
Where no one wants to come here.
Yeah, and then they'll emigrate to
And then America will
Brazil.
finally be great again.
Yeah. I mean, that is the kind of, I don't know if it's silver lining, what exactly it is, but it's nice to be in a country where a ton of people desperately want to come, and that should tell us something. Like that's nice.
Yeah,
it's better than being in the country people desperately want to leave. So I remember being in Albania. For those who are not aware, served an LDS mission in Albania. Shkimi. Yes. Loved Albania. And Albania, relative, I think, to a lot of other countries, was pretty nice. It was, not wealthy at all, but I think was safe, certainly relative to a number of other countries that have more serious gang problems. And people there were so stoked about the idea, particularly of going to the U.S. They didn't go to Greece as much. Greece was having awful economic trouble at the time, but historically had gone to Greece a lot, and then Italy. Mm-hmm. So, if they could get to the U.S., that's the best. If they get Italy, that's second best. Greece at that point might not be better than staying, but like they relatively few of them, I felt like, were totally psyched about staying in Albania all their lives, especially the young mm-hmm. people. Oh, Germany was another one. And so it's nice to be on the the other side of that. But okay, so a few things here in terms of money and other. Okay, so first off, I'm not sure the Democrats are really pushing to let in a lot more people. I think what they're really animated by is wanting to be nice to the people that are here. That it's not a trap necessarily, but they really just want to be humane. Uh-huh. And so it's very hard to say no to people that are trying to come here because they're escaping some awful situation. And then you can't, and then once people are here, very difficult to uproot them out of their new home and split families up and all that. Whereas you do have a subset of people on the right that I think are much more willing to do that for the purpose of preserving a coherent, America. As far as the optimal level of immigration, I asked Professor Hernandez about this too, but there really isn't one because it always changes. Like you're gonna if you had some perfect number of people doing the exact right set of things every year, it would be your needs would be different in some years than others.
Yeah,
and or from others, and yeah, so hard to give like a hard number. But you can say that once the foreign porn population gets to a particular level, people get really mad about it. And I think that's worth paying attention to. So during the Biden administration, the percentage of the population that was foreign-born reached its highest level in U.S. history, or something around there, about 15%. The previous time...
Of all births...
What?
All births in the U.S. or
no? That's the percentage of the total U.S. population of 340 million or whatever that is born elsewhere.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it was like 50 million people were born in another country.
Okay,
and living here, and that percentage, the 15, so that set a record, breaking the record set in I want to say 1890 or sometime between 1890
during
and
the railroad construction days, like
a little bit after that. But yeah, back a while ago when it was like 14 point something percent. And at that point, you also had a similar sort of push, like there's a major push to limit immigration. Ultimately successful effort to limit immigration, and that there is some evidence that was a bad idea. Like the rate at which we had new patents, new inventions, and whatnot dropped precipitously after that for a stretch, and yeah.
Well, I mean, the patent office closed, like, I can't remember what year it was because they said that everything that had been invented had been invented.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Or it's completely false and I just heard it and it's wrong.
I have no idea.
But during some year,
Yeah.
apparently it closed and their reason was given like we've invented
everything
that could possibly be invented.
And by the way, I want to make one note. It's not like I think the sole argument for letting people into the country is that we will be able to invent more stuff.
Because Einstein will come in.
Yeah, although nice.
Well, that was kind of nice.
Yeah, although at that point he didn't make quite as many contributions to new things, but it was a lot of people that we let him with him, and it was great to have him. But he was past his prime at that point. He came in like 33. I think Theory of Relativity was published in 1905. So he'd been a very big deal for a long time, but he was no longer at the forefront of innovation in physics. But I think it's also like immigrants are much more likely to start new businesses and a lot of other stuff like that. And there are I think systematic reasons for that. Like if you come in and you maybe don't speak the language, or you don't speak it that well, or you don't have America specific qualifications for something, for maybe the job you did in your home country, you start a business, as opposed to getting a job with a firm here. Okay, back to the money to fix this whole problem. Like, do we need more people to process applications? In asylum, with respect to asylum cases, that is absolutely true. We have a 2 million person backlog of asylum applications, and our immigration judges, who are there for defensive applications, and USCIS, I forget their title, but I'll call them application evaluators. You got like 1 million in each of these categories, and they just can't do them nearly fast enough. So yeah, they're having way more people would kind of make sense, but that's just asylum. The number of people we let into the country legally, like on purpose, with paths to permanent residency and whatnot, those are set by statute. So that's Congress, and that I don't think is about hiring more people.
So money won't fix the problem.
Not unless we're bribing the right people, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, we can talk about it, but
if it works,
it is what it is. Yeah. So I don't know. Immigration's a hard one.
All right. Well, we solved immigration.
Okay.
So
yeah, we solved it by not solving it. Main issues. I think people are really, really mad about ICE raids. Yeah, people on the left, I should say, are mad about that, and people on the right are maybe they're not totally sold.
It just seems to be like human rights.
Yeah,
are important to some, and the way we treat other people is important, and to others it's more of we have a crisis of too many people being here illegally, and it doesn't really matter.
I would put it a little differently, because I think both sides would argue that they're on the side of human rights. The question is whose rights you're prioritizing.
Well, I mean, it's not so much of like it's not that black and white, of course.
Right.
But just the reason that people are mad, it seems like it's different reasons.
Yeah. I think maybe on the left, what we would say is, speaking very generally, there are people who are trying to preserve American values and trying to reflect them by being kind to people, to the huddled masses and whatnot that come here for refuge from their home countries, which might have some sort of disorder. And then on the other side, you have people that are concerned about preserving American society. And
Yeah.
Um. So that was immigration. That's
Okay.
kind of what's
Easy.
happening there. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. Then on Saturday, so June 14th, that was a big day. So you had the No Kings protests that went on across the country. Those were responsive protests to the military parade in D.C. that was, depending on who you ask, was set to commemorate the 250th birthday of the Army, United States Army, or Trump's birthday. So June 14th is both the birthday of the U.S. Army. And now, granted, I had never heard that before, had never looked into it, and we didn't have a formal standing army until, like, once we had an actual United States of America. We didn't have that until, 1791, I believe, 1791 or 2.
I'll have to trust you on that one.
Yeah, but June 14th, 1970, or sorry, 1975. No soldiers. Yeah, just a couple
Man,
of
those
militiamen.
world
that went-
wars,
yeah, tough fighting
fought by a
them
bunch of volunteers, you know.
yeah, they were. I guess a lot of them did volunteer, but we to be in the army. So 1775. I think they started putting people in the army in Lexington, Massachusetts, or something. Anyway, but it's also Trump's birthday, and then you have this military parade that is both on the president's birthday, which feels a little North Korea-y.
Yeah, that was my thought.
Yeah, that was a lot of people's thought. That's why they went to these huge protests. And who knows what will come of it. I tend to be... So protests are interesting because, well, they're interesting for a number of reasons. But one of them is that you kind of don't get to pick who shows up with you. So, like, to go back to the LA immigration protests for a minute, vast majority of the people protesting are, very peaceful, doing, all that.
Oh yeah, so one video that I saw
Yeah.
was the Mexican flag burning one,
Sure.
and then another video was like people handing out tacos from a taco truck.
Yeah.
and then like they're just dancing and singing.
Yep. And that's the thing. You have both, and having one doesn't erase the other. So, you have the guy that's, you have the guys that are burning the cars, and then you have some unrelated looting and whatnot. And that does not negate the fact that the majority of the people, vast majority of the people there are, very peaceful and just want some particular thing and are exercising their First Amendment rights in a legal and commendable manner. And then at the same time, the fact that you have all these people over here, the fact that protests are mostly peaceful, does not negate the fact that you might occasionally have some rioting and destruction of property and some attempted violence towards policemen or whoever else. And with the No Kings, I think those actually were fully peaceful, I think. The other thing about not picking who shows up with you is that you might go to, say, an immigration-related protest because you don't want ICE conducting raids that break up families. Okay. Or you go to the No Kings protest because you think it's a little creepy to have a military parade on the president's birthday, even if it's ostensibly the Army's birthday as well. We don't really do military parades in this country. Haven't done one in a long time. But then you're going to show up with people who are like, this is all part of this bigger thing, and what we really need to do is tear down capitalism or some other part of the system or whatever. And now you are making common cause with people with whom you might agree in small part and disagree in large part. But then people that are outside the protest and want to characterize the protest in a particular way can just pick whoever they want to paint the whole with the brush that describes the part.
Yeah, because surprise, I guess it's complicated as well. Things don't tend to be 100% one way or the other.
No.
And people are complicated and have different reasons for why they want X, Y, or Z, which is why I feel really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I don't seem like it while I'm on here, but just making a general statement about anything is just, I hate it. Like I hate doing it, but I don't know how else to communicate these broad ideas about how I feel, because I can tell you how I feel and I can give guesses on why people are doing what they're doing, but everyone just has their own unique reason for wanting something, and it's why I hate there being a two-party system.
Two parties. So, yeah, what one of the like major downsides of the two-party system, and granted, you see some of these same weaknesses in systems with many more parties, but maybe not to the same degree. But in the two-party system, you're taking all these people with these diverse viewpoints and you're funneling them down to a single point on both sides, and then
it just breeds extreme points of view.
Well, and it's just kind of unfair. It means that, like, so, we have this giant funnel that captures everyone on the right and takes them down to this, maybe, well, there's this point of voted for Donald Trump, or, maybe there are some people that dissent, but, generally share a lot of the same viewpoints. But, okay, and now you take that voted for Donald Trump and you get to paint that whole group of people however you'd paint, or basically however you want, based on the person of that group you like least, or based on Trump himself, when they might really not like Trump very much, but just didn't feel that the alternative was very compelling. And then same thing on the left, where, it's this giant funnel and you take them down to one point, and then you get to call all of them socialists.
I feel like everyone I talked to said that they like plugged their nose and looked the other way when they voted for Hillary. And that was like the most common thing I heard from anyone that voted for her. Yeah. And I was like,
great.
Why? Like there has to be a better system where we can get people that we actually want. But it's just, sorry, this is unrelated.
No, it's kind of related, because I think it gets us to our next point, because I think there are a lot of people, people on the left now that Trump is in office, back to the, like, how could someone possibly vote for this guy? It's like, well, okay, well, let's look at their alternatives. The alternative was Biden, then it was Harris. Harris, I think, it was funny. There were a lot of people on the media on the left was like, she ran a flawless, brilliant campaign. I don't think that was true at all.
No, and it started way too late too.
Yeah,
which wasn't her fault.
No, there are plenty of stuff that was not her fault. I think Biden was leaning on her hard throughout the campaign to not distance herself from him, which I think doomed her completely. But, like, if not voting for Trump means voting for the status quo, which people did not like, or a great many people did not like.
Well, you're also voting for a woman, and someone doesn't have white skin. So
yeah, and I'm sure
those two factors are as much as I'd like to say they don't matter. Yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah.
To a lot of people for whatever conscious, unconscious, biased, unbiased, whatever, it just matters.
So
that's a difference.
So yeah, I think all I will say to that, though, to go against that, is that, one, it's really hard to measure how much we think, how much that actually mattered. Two, yes, there are plenty of people that are probably, maybe a little racist in the way they vote, or a little sexist in the way they vote. But, President Obama, who shared skin color with Vice President Harris, won 2 elections by a lot, which is not to say that there aren't racists here. There are a lot of them, but it's not an insurmountable obstacle. And then being a woman, that one, I have a hard time with. It's like, because women are 0 for 2, but it was Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. I think neither of whom are, I know they were groundbreaking candidates in a literal sense, like, the first, first 2 women to run, and then, first black woman to run, but I don't think are great candidates. They're not. They're in a vacuum. They're not incredible
They're not
candidates.
winners.
In a literal sense, they are not.
Yeah.
Although Hillary did win the popular vote. But the thing for me about, when people talk about like not nominating a woman again, it's like, no, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's the right takeaway. And like I look at the countries that I think are most similar to us culturally. I look at the UK. It's pretty similar. They elected Maggie Thatcher. She was prime minister for a decade. Like, okay, and they did that 40 years ago. Like, I don't like,
and well, like Canada has had, I know.
have they?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Oh.
I mean, I'm not the expert, but
It would be so funny if you're just thinking of Justin Trudeau. He's quite pretty.
he is pretty.
Is that Justin or Justine?
Yeah.
And Germany had Merkel.
Well, yeah. I mean,
for a good while.
It can be done.
It can clearly be done,
And
and it can be done in America by an American woman. Like, it would have to be done by an American woman because of the whole Constitution.
Yeah.
But I 100% think it could be done, and there are there are some women that I think will be big contenders in 2028 or in the 2028 primaries for Democrats at the very least.
Taylor Swift,
Beyonce,
Oprah,
possibly Katy Perry.
I
And
hope
maybe
so.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. We'll see.
AOC.
Actually, yeah, I'd imagine she will run. If not in 2028, then 2032.
Yeah, it seems like she's preparing herself for something.
She has a huge national profile. Bernie's getting really old. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I know that women can win. It just seems like it's just going to be harder.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it just seems to be harder in America specifically as opposed to other places, but
And the thing is, because it's never in a vacuum. We don't actually know that.
well,
it is.
maybe so if it was a Republican woman,
Right, like Giorgia Meloni's current prime minister of Italy, very conservative, and super popular as far as I can tell. Having not looked at any polls in Italy ever, seems like she's popular with the Italians. No, a Republican woman, I think 100% that would clear that one hurdle.
Sarah Palin.
Okay. Well, this is where we get back to some people just not being great candidates. Oh man, it was McCain and Obama. It was like, oh man, McCain's facing an uphill battle, and then he picks Palin. It's like, oh, this is over.
I remember that being such a big deal at the time, and now that's just kind of like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Like so many crazier things have happened, and people.
Oh yeah. Man, but no, I mean McCain and Palin got obliterated. Not like Reagan, but not historical obliteration, but in modern terms, certainly that was an obliteration. Yeah.
All right.
Let's see.
What's next on our
next
world
on our
problems
list.
that we're solving or whatever?
So in terms of political violence, I was going to bridge into that briefly. Oh no, I was going to talk about Biden because we brought up the alternative to Trump. Biden. So turns out he has, I think, metastatic prostate cancer, which is too bad. So we hope he's doing okay with that. But you've had a number of books come out, or that are going to come out, about, let's say, if we're not going to call it a cover-up, we'll say
what's
people in Biden's inner circle took steps to
certain liberties
to shield him from the public eye and make it look like he was doing better.
So they were gaslighting
us. Yeah, doing better than he was.
That did not make me happy.
I think it made a lot of people unhappy. I think Democrats have not and probably will not for a while really deal with what damage that did. Maybe we don't know what damage that did.
I already have zero trust and faith in the Democratic Party.
But now it's like
and
-4.
now it's even worse.
Yeah,
Like,
I think there are a lot of people for whom,
and
really
I was
kind of
totally
did
caught
that
up in the probably the Reddit brainwashing of Bernie Sanders
Mm,
not being chosen over Hillary Clinton.
yeah.
And since then, I was always wondering, like, that's when my kind of hatred of the two party system came in.
Mm,
Um, and it's only gotten worse, I feel, since then, of just distrust of how things are being chosen, how things are being run. And like, I just want someone that's going to be good. I don't really care.
hmm
I don't care what party they're in. I want the candidates to be like real people that have opinions that reflect a large portion of the country at least.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like it's just whoever has the right amount of connections or power in a certain area, and nothing really to do with the actual policies. It's just, okay, who can we get in? Who's like our highest chance of success? We go with that person no matter what. And at some point, they must have decided Joe Biden was their highest chance.
So here's the question, though. This is interesting. How do you explain Trump?
Uh, very hard to describe Trump.
So I'm going to give it a go.
Well,
Oh,
part
you give it a go.
part of the I think part of the reason he won
Mm-hmm.
is because he is or was countercultural to the system as it was being seen. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like comparing him to Mitt Romney
Yeah.
is like it's like complete opposite.
They're both very rich, but other than that, they're both very rich and they're white, and I think they're similar height. But once we get beyond that,
Yeah,
there are not a lot of similarities.
Yeah, he's and part of me for sure was like, I kind of like this. Like this guy that's coming in and is just saying like, I don't like this. Let's change it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't agree. I don't agree with some of the things he's done
Yeah.
to change things. But part of me was like, oh, wow, it's kind of is refreshing that some guy can just do this if he wants. But at some point, he did become the person that was going to have the best chance to win at
Yeah.
some point.
The way I put it is that the parties, and this in recent years has, I think, maybe particularly been true of the Democratic Party, the institutional parties will put their thumb on the scales to the greatest degree they can. But it's not the only thing that matters. They don't fully pick winners. They just can apply pressure in a certain direction. So Bernie, maybe part of the reason he lost is that the Democratic Party, the DNC, the Institutional Democratic Party, was putting its thumb on the scales. They really wanted Hillary, and they did really want Hillary. And that was, I think, fairly obvious. But had Bernie really been that much more popular than her, he would have won. They wouldn't have been able to stop it. Because, and then Trump, when he started, same election cycle, the party very much did not want him. And you've got a number of people that now support him that went on the record and said, if we nominate him, we're going to get, I think Lindsey Graham said, if we nominate him, we're going to get killed and we're going to deserve it. The institutional Republican Party very much wanted a different candidate. But Trump, he won by too much. It wasn't close by the end. It started out really close. Like he wasn't winning a majority in the early states, but you had so many other kind of okay candidates that they're pulling, they're pulling votes from each other, and so he's winning and fairly comfortably, and he's winning a number of states. And then you just go further along, and more important people drop off, and those votes don't consolidate under Cruz or Rubio or Kasich. A number of them go to Trump, and he eventually is just he became unbeatable on the Republican side. And then over time, because he is a profoundly forceful, dynamic figure, he remade the institutional Republican Party in his image.
Mm-hmm.
And so this last, and competitive primary processes tend to yield the best candidates. I heard a podcast, Scott Galloway, who's got a good podcast. He was talking to Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson about their book about Biden and about how the Democratic Party, a lot of the trouble it's gotten into is in trying to control people top down. And, so that they ended up with Hillary, and there's kind of this perception that they hadn't run as competitive a primary process. I think, she beat Bernie. But if you look at the last 3 election cycles, the best one for Democrats was the one where they didn't put the thumb on the scales nearly as much. So in 2020, I think there was less of an institutional effort to make sure it was Biden. Maybe I'm forgetting that, but it was a competitive. They ran a fully competitive primary process. You had a lot of candidates who were fighting each other, and then you end up at the end. You have Buttigieg and Klobuchar drop out, and they endorse Biden, and now he kind of surges to a comfortable victory. And then 2024, there's no primary, not really.
Yeah.
You had Dean Phillips, a very brave congressman from Minnesota who you had never heard of.
No idea who that is.
Yeah. He's a congressman who very rich guy, comes from a family, I think a brewing family. And he's like, Biden's super old, and this is a problem to people, and I don't know why the party is not paying more attention to this. So I'm going to run against him. And so he does, but no one takes him seriously because, just no one took him seriously.
Okay. Yeah.
And so they don't have debates, or anything like that. And Biden he's going to sew up the nomination until he has that really early debate with Trump, which goes record-breakingly poorly. And then they don't run it. They could have run a mini primary then, and it's not about offending Harris or anything. Not that should be the consideration. Like if you're trying to win an election and you're trying to get the best person possible to be your president, personal feelings, I think, have to be a secondary concern. But they don't run a primary then. You just pick Harris or effectively pick Harris because, Biden endorses her. And so, Obama and these other people, they wanted to run a mini primary. So you don't get that. And maybe Harris, would have won a primary. I really doubt it. Or at the very least, she would have been stronger for having come out of a primary.
Oh, I don't think so. I mean,
you don't think she would have won? Or you
I
think
don't
she would
think
have been
so.
weaker?
Yeah,
I don't think she would have won.
Just based off of public perception of her before, I feel like there was a very big push to change her image.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
After that announcement was made, because the only thing, I think she had one of the lowest. Did they call them approval ratings or something for vice president? It was like really bad.
Yeah, I think when she ran, there was a genuine outpouring of joy on the left when she became the presumptive nominee. Yeah. I think there was actual bona fide excitement.
It felt more like relief.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's all this excitement, but people were so stoked to have their candidate be clearly among the living.
Yeah.
That there was just Harris, let's go, And then I thought pretty quickly, it was like, ooh, I don't think she's that good a candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, too bad. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening to this who are like, well, she's much better than Trump. And it's like, well, right. I mean, we on the left agree with you, but
but
not a great candidate.
Those things affect people.
Yeah.
You don't get it if you don't think she's a great candidate, you're not as likely to go vote for her when the time comes, just straight up.
No, or if you think Biden sucks and is vice, like maybe you're kind of in the middle. You could go either way, but you think the last 4 years have kind of stunk. Inflation hit you. Democrats don't seem to be doing anything about it. They seem weak and like they're getting a lot of their positions from focus groups and activist groups, and like Harris doesn't have any real views of her own, and she's just this mouthpiece for whatever is popular on the left at the time, and she hasn't explained any of her evolution on issues with any sort of credibility at all. And then you just forget if you didn't like Trump, like maybe those years seemed fine. Yeah. And so, there are a lot of people that might have been on the fence that ended up going to Trump.
So you, with that description of Harris you just gave, you kind of described most of the Democratic Party to me.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I don't know anything, but that's the feeling I've had about almost every single Democrat
for a while
I've ever taken any time to look into at all. It's just been like, okay, what about you is different from Democrat B? Like you guys, you're the same person.
Yeah.
And that's very annoying.
I don't think it was true certainly of early Obama. It was not true of early Obama. And it was not
yeah,
true
I
of
mean,
Clinton.
Obama got people to go vote for him.
A lot.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the fact that he was black, right?
It was not.
No. People are like, oh, well, he was just the first black president, and so people are just all going to vote for him because he's black. And looking back on it, like people were like just so hyped about him as a person.
He was yeah.
And he got people to go out. People were not like, some people were kind of similar with Hillary Clinton in the fact that, okay, finally it's a woman.
It's a lady. Yeah.
But she did not get people to go out in the same way and get excited about her because she was not it.
Yeah.
Obama was it. Like,
yeah.
He was the guy.
He was, yeah. No, he was it. And he won big in 2008, and then he won pretty dang big, much bigger than anyone has since, in 2012. Even after his popularity had gone down a bit, people were like, still kind of stoked, actually.
Yeah.
And I prefer that to Mitt and Paul Ryan. There's something else. I actually have an article in the works on this, but about 45 draft articles out there somewhere. But anyway, Obama, or sorry, not Obama. Clinton said in 2002, so this is after he was president, this is in the wake of the 2002 midterms. Democrats didn't do very well. And he said, when people feel uncertain, they'll pick strong and wrong over weak and right. And it's kind of a favorable way to frame it to the people that just lost, because it's like, no, you're right, but you come off as weak, so people are picking the strong team. Where, like, I don't necessarily agree with, like, starting from that default assumption that you're right. But I think that people see Trump as someone who has remade the Republican Party in his image. And the party's issues now coming from him, clearly not. So it's not a focus group. Like, I'm sure there are some focus groups that have impact from time to time, but it's I think a lot of it is this focus group of one, or certainly that's the public perception. And actually, okay, I'll say that's the perception, because I think he only has a few issues that he really cares about, and then a lot of it is coming from these different parts of the right that get along well with him.
Yeah.
But let's say that the perception is that it is coming from him, and he definitely did remake the party to a great degree. And then on the left, what you have is the perception that it's all bottom up, like the party apparatus from top down is trying to control people, and then the policies are coming or outside in. They're coming from these activist groups, not from like Harris. It's not like it did not seem like she had a long-standing, coherent set of views on economic policy.
Yeah, like viewpoints, like things that she was really wanting to do.
Yeah. I don't know that she. I don't know what I would say that it's like. I know for a fact she really cares about that, and she's been pushing that for years. Couldn't tell you anything.
Yeah. So one thing that I thought was interesting is I learned that like presidential debates used to be like 3 hours long. So before like television got involved,
Yeah.
they were like pretty intense,
Yeah.
long debates where this gets into our conversation about AI and stuff where
Mm.
you had to pay attention,
Mm.
you had to be able to follow an argument,
Yeah.
and once television was added, it became much more kind of spectacle. Like people said that Nixon looked really horrible on camera, and like that's why he lost or something. Like there's, I think the focus has shifted a lot to how we perceive the candidates rather than what are their core beliefs necessarily. When those two things line up,
Yeah.
I think it's a home run.
Yeah.
So for someone like Trump, where it's like to the people that like him, he's like a superstar
Yeah.
and so easy to vote for.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that he's saying are resonating with them. So like he's a home run for as a candidate. Harris, I don't know.
Yeah.
Almost none of that in any direction.
Yeah. And they try to back engineer it and tell the story, where it's like, she was Attorney General of California and here she is.
I'm
child
sure she's accomplished in a billion ways that I'll never understand or know or really get to appreciate.
Mm.
But the perception of it is just not there.
Yeah. To the debate point, so based off my memory, so 1858, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, very famous debates. Those were 3 hours long. You had, I think it was an hour opening statement, followed by an hour and a half rebuttal, followed by a half-hour final statement. So one, then the other, then the other, and they had a few of these.
Uh-huh.
So think about that. You're in the audience. Obviously, this is not on TV or on radio. You're there in the audience. You're listening to Abraham Lincoln speak for an hour. I don't know. Maybe you pee your pants at some point. Maybe they just didn't drink that much water back then.
Yeah, maybe they didn't pee back then.
Maybe they didn't pee.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he speaks for an hour. It's like, all right, Stephen Douglas, your turn. Douglas gets up. He speaks for 90 minutes. Now at that point, you're thinking, okay, pretty good arguments. Okay. And I would assume they're not just rambling. They're pretty prepared. But anyway, you just listen to him for an hour and a half. And then Lincoln's back up, and he's speaking for another half hour. The entire length of a theatrical version of a Lord of the Rings film, you're just listening to two dudes talk.
Yeah.
Then so fast forward 100 years. The first time you had televised presidential debates was for Kennedy and Nixon, 1960. And what you're referring to with Nixon looking bad, I think it's that for the first one, I believe they did 3. Nixon refused makeup and something like I'm not 100% sure, but he didn't look.
He
good.
just looked bad.
Yeah, Kennedy. It's like here's this hot guy from Massachusetts. He's
good,
kind of royal,
good-looking fellow.
Yeah, it's a shame he's Catholic, but
good in front of the cameras.
Yeah, I heard he was dating Marilyn Monroe, or whatever. But they had 8-minute opening statements, each of them, that they're doing without notes. Unless each of them had teleprompter, but I don't think there were. I think they just were speaking for 8 minutes. And then they had, I don't remember the length of the segments, but they had, certain length of, they had certain periods to answer questions.
Uh-huh.
And you read the transcript from those debates, and they're much more coherent than what we have nowadays, where now the opening statement is like 2 or 3 minutes. And then you have these brief segments. And the thing is, we are very polarized now. We're very polarized.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much of that, or I wonder if we're also just not doing nearly enough to change people's minds, because like if you're going to change someone's mind, it's going to take you more than the length of a TikTok video generally. Like if someone is really convinced that, our immigration policy should be X, or we should allow, X number of people to do for some sort of visa. Like if you really want to address all their concerns and get to the bottom of why they believe that, and then explain and talk them into a different position, it's going to take you more than a minute and a half. There are
because it's so complicated, and
yeah,
and you have to figure out what they think first too, which
it really helps.
I mean you can't. And it takes time. It takes physical time.
Yeah.
To explain what's in your head.
Yeah.
And then get a response in return.
Yeah. Like a great 1 minute speech is going to convince some number of people of something. Take that same issue and extend it out to an hour. A 1 hour speech, a great one, is going to be more convincing, is going to convince more people. The problem is that far fewer people are going to listen for an hour.
Uh-huh.
That's where you run into trouble, I think. But I do wonder how much of our polarization is due to, in part, to having shorter attention spans.
I mean, that's why I think it's a perception thing. Like,
in what sense?
Like, I don't want to say it's a popularity contest because it simplifies it too much, but
yeah.
Just how somebody feels about somebody is going to determine whether or not they vote for them way more than policy based at this point for me. Like
and you think that's because they're not spending enough time
engaging with the arguments? Because the arguments matter a little bit less. There's there are big things that people care about, and as long as those are mentioned, it's like yeah. Immigration, woohoo.
Yeah.
Or treating people like human beings. Yeah. But outside of that, not a whole lot of nuance. It just seems rah, go team. Yeah. Everyone's happy. Follow your party.
Yeah. Yeah. Think about that a lot recently, too, reading about Winston Churchill in parliamentary debates of the 1800s and early 1900s. Yeah, they spoke for ages. They give super long speeches. Those dudes must have had urinals under every chair, but they
chamber pots,
chambers of parliament, chamber pots. But yeah, I do wonder. I lament what has become of us to some extent.
No going back at this point.
No, we'll have to go sideways or something. Let's see. Okay, we've already spoken for a good while, so let's try. We're finishing up stuff from the weekend briefly. So we had some political violence over the weekend. We had in Minnesota, we had a state lawmaker and her husband murdered by a guy who then went on and shot and wounded another state lawmaker and his wife. He was caught this morning. We're recording this on Monday.
So the second one's still alive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Really bad. I think there's been some stuff about the guy having, voted for Trump, or being anti-abortion, and but then being on some council appointed by Waltz. No indication Waltz knew who he was, but just like there are a million councils and you appoint people to things as governor and whatnot. Extremist violence is always unsettling. And it's not clear why deranged people do deranged things, because there's so many different ways to become deranged. And so at this juncture, I don't think I do not think it is advisable for us to say one where why he did it exactly.
Can you say deranged as someone on the left? Is that a proper terminology to use?
I hope so. I don't know.
You better look that up, man. If you're gonna be a good old boy in the Democratic Party, you better figure out the terminology to use.
Yeah. Well, okay.
A person experiencing delusions or
derangement, delusions of grandeur, delusions of murder.
You got to be respectful, man.
Yeah. Well,
Human rights, remember?
yeah. So the guy has, speaking of human rights, he's been charged with, I think the feds are charged him with capital murder, and he's been charged with similar crimes in Minnesota. So from the federal crimes, he could face the death penalty. It does seem reasonably likely that the federal government will pursue that in this case. Yeah. So anyway, and then there was also political violence at the No Kings protest in Salt Lake. There was a guy.
That situation's kind of weird.
So what happened, as I understand it, is that a guy went to shoot people at the parade and had an AR-15 or some other sort of high-capacity gun.
Uh-huh.
And then the peacekeeping force people that had, like, there were hired peacekeeping forces there, some sort of security.
That's what I don't understand. Like,
Yeah, I don't.
The way they described what a peacekeeper was sounded like a gun nut to me. Like,
Which
just
is
like,
interesting for like a left-leaning protest.
yeah. And
I don't know who hired him.
Yeah, the whole thing just sounds like, okay, so your average Utah citizen was there
Was there
and called themselves a peacekeeper. Yeah.
So what happened was they shot this guy and he was wounded and did not kill anyone, but they did shoot and kill
collateral
an
damage
bystander. Yeah, I believe was a fashion designer.
The legal stuff there is messy, man.
It will be interesting to see if the state or anyone steps in to really compensate that poor fellow's family. He had wife and kids, I think. It's one of the dangers of guns being fired in crowded spaces, unsurprisingly, is that it's very possible to hit people you're not trying to hit.
Yeah.
The story of that always sticks out in my head, and I can't remember the details, but it was from the last few years in New York City, and there was some sort of a potential active shooter, a person evading the cops or whatever, and there was an exchange of fire with NYPD, and NYPD managed to shoot. They wounded like 8 people. They wounded like 8 different people, and not the shooter. He hit no one, and they didn't hit him, but they did hit 8 other.
Gosh,
I think it was 8. It was a very high number of not the shooter. Yeah. Anyway, so some political violence. I think I never like tying political violence directly to a particular political movement or anything like that, unless there's a clear connection.
Yeah, unless it's like stated.
Because there are so many just kind of crazy people out there, like the guy, John Hinckley Jr. that shot Ronald Reagan, was doing it to impress Jodie Foster. It's like that's a
worthy effort.
It was good try. I don't think it worked, but yeah, like basically the point being you might just have a true nut,
right?
And so we'll talk about this again when more information comes out. But there are a number of, there's a lot of big stuff happening right now. Big Beautiful Bill continues to work its way through Congress. We can talk about that later. But then Israel attacked Iran.
So was that to so they were destroying nuclear capable facilities or something, or was it like stockpiles of weapons, or what was it?
So I think it's a mix of things. A lot of the nuclear facilities would be very difficult to touch. I think they're like in a one of the main one I believe is in a mountain. So they damaged some facilities to some extent. They killed certain high-ranking nuclear scientists and members of Iran's armed forces. And then they've attacked other targets. There has been collateral damage. There have been civilians killed. They attacked a news station, I believe was the most recent one before we started recording. And, they did what I think they've done in Gaza, which is announce it's like, you should evacuate this area. And I don't know how they announce that. And then they bomb it. They also over the weekend, I think Mossad had infiltrated. Maybe that's how they killed the high-ranking soldiers. They had a good idea where certain people were, so they're able to take them out. And then Iran has responded, and some missiles have gotten through Israel's Iron Dome, and people have been killed in Israel, but albeit far fewer. And so the context for this, and again, this is something we'll discuss in much greater detail, I think, another time. But the context, as I understand it at this point, is that, one, Iran has been waging a proxy war against Israel for some time. So Iran was funding Hamas, was funding Hezbollah, funding the Houthis. And so, Israel obviously has been involved in a highly controversial war or conflict, call it one of those, with Palestine, particularly in the Gaza Strip, since October 7th, 2023, which is when the Hamas militants came over the border into Israel and attacked the music festival and kidnapped people. And there's a lot of killing and kidnapping.
Yeah.
And then Israel's response has been defended in some quarters and I think compellingly attacked in others, we'll say.
Okay. Yeah.
But there have been, every war there's bad stuff that happens in every war. But I think there's definitely stuff that has happened over the last couple of years that would violate international law.
Yeah.
And continues to happen. And then, but with Iran, getting back to Iran has been enriching uranium. And what I've read is that they would be able to build up to 15 nuclear weapons within a matter of weeks. And that would be in violation. So the U.S. negotiated the treaty.
Because we told them you can't have them at some point.
So we did. Yeah, we had a treaty with them where we gave them some stuff, allowed them to enrich to some degree, but not enough to build a nuclear weapon. We were not the only signatory to the treaty. You also had, I think, Britain and France and maybe Germany. But we, during the first Trump administration, withdrew from this agreement, didn't get back into it under Biden, and Iran has been enriching more and more uranium, and it's gotten to a point where, Israel, for right or wrong, views Iran as, the state sponsor of the people that are directly attacking them, and then that they were building, they're getting to the point where they could build nukes and really become an existential threat to Israel very quickly, and so they wanted to preemptively attack, even as the U.S. and Iran are engaged in ongoing negotiations regarding the cessation of the enriching of uranium to some degree. Yeah, so I think what I wanted to say about this at this point is that there's a lot we don't understand coming from the U.S. Like I'm speaking maybe not for the U.S. generally, but speaking for us, there's a lot we don't understand. The history of the region, I think, is complex, and we don't know what it's like to live in countries that are constantly at risk of being destroyed by a country very near to it.
Yeah.
It's complicated because because Iran has been waging they've been going back and forth as I don't want to say Iran has been just waging a proxy war against Israel. They have been waging a proxy war against Israel, and then Israel has been very much fighting hard against Iran's proxies, some of whom are not super capable of defending themselves.
Yeah.
And then I'd also note, I think peace is not always the path to peace. Been thinking about that. And it's funny because the different sides of this conflict would paint it as the parties as different sides of this, but I've been reading about the run-up to World War II And what was done in Europe, because the UK and France and the U.S. They were going through this pacifist, isolationist period, but they were so afraid of entering another World War I style war that they appeased Hitler for years and took really kind of crazy steps to appease him in, letting him annex Austria and then basically, giving him part of Czechoslovakia and then kind of not doing anything when he took the rest of it. And like just at every step, it was like, we don't want to make this guy mad because if we do that, it might lead to another world war. But by not stopping him when they could easily, when Germany didn't really have much of an army yet, by not stopping him at that point, they ensured that they would end up in a world war. And now, granted, at the time, like we're saying that looking back, at the time they couldn't really have known that. And every incentive is to avoid that happening. And now what you have, like from a U.S. perspective, it's like we see our main Middle Eastern ally, Israel, attack Iran, our biggest Middle Eastern enemy, I guess we could say, adversary. And it's like, okay, this is something that could plausibly spin into World War III.
Yeah,
and
that's why it's spooky.
Yeah, I think that's one reason it's spooky. I'm skeptical of that happening for a couple of reasons. One of them is that Iran, I think, is pretty weak, relatively speaking. Like so far, their response has not been that impressive.
Well, I saw a meme.
Okay.
Of there's 4 people having a snowball fight, 2 on each side.
Okay.
And the guy labeled America as making snowballs for Israel.
Sure.
Who's throwing them at Iran, and Russia is making snowballs for the other guys.
Yep.
And then Israel gets hit with a snowball filled with a rock.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's a very detailed meme.
And Iran, like, after seeing the damage done, Iran looks back at Russia, and Russia's like, well,
that's what we got.
Yeah. And their message is like, if weapons are provided to them, like through some other source, like if they had like a nuclear weapon or something, and used it, that could be it's just the implications of this fighting in general, what that could lead to, because like everyone knows the story about World War II, how it was like some guy was eating a sandwich after he tried to assassinate someone, and then he saw him riding by and assassinated.
That's World War I.
Yeah, World War I.
Yeah.
And they say that's the start of that war. So it's not too much of a leap for me to think that bombing a country could lead to World War III as well,
Yeah. What you're referring to is the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who it was the guy who killed him. I forget his name.
It was a botched attempt at first.
Yeah, no, yeah. He initially, I can't remember if his gun misfired or something. Anyway, he tried to kill him, and it's like, that didn't work. It's like, gosh dang it. So he goes and he's down some alley eating a sandwich, and then Franz Ferdinand's driver takes a wrong turn down the alley, and then like would have to turn around, and the guy's like, shoots him and his wife. And that, a few more steps down the road leads to,
because they're related to somebody that's
he was the heir, he was the heir apparent of Austro-Hungary. Well, I hope I have that right. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then anyway, and there are all these different alliances. And it's like this country declares war, and now that means these other 5 countries have to declare war, and now we're all in it, and it's the worst war.
Yeah,
it is such a bad war, even compared to World War II. I think it's just they're both awful wars, but Yeah, so like it and not I think, unbelievable to think of this conflict metastasizing into something much worse. But then, Iran reached out. I think I read in the Wall Street Journal earlier today that they reached out. They really want to kickstart and fast track negotiations with the U.S. because they don't particularly like this.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and but it's also an indication that I don't think they are in all that strong a military position. Just whereas I
Yeah.
think Israel, I think, is both because they have gotten some great equipment from the U.S. and a lot of financial assistance, but then also I think they're just really good at war. Like Mossad, the stuff they do,
Yeah.
like it seems like stuff out of
Well, they're also
farcical spy fiction.
they're also a country that like everyone
Yeah,
is in the military
yeah.
at some
That,
point.
like I have it's funny because I have friends that have very strong feelings on both sides of this conflict, which is part of why it's hard to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I have friends who have spent time in Israel who have family in Israel, and to listen to them, and I actually I wanted to get a sense of like because I 'cause most of what I see on social media is very anti Israel's military actions. I want to get a sense of what are they talking about with Iran. So I listened to this. Bless you. I listened to an Israeli podcast talking about it, and they're pretty stoked about it because I think they really don't like Iran. But talking to a friend, it's like Americans just don't really understand what it's like to be very comfortable and familiar with the sound of bomb sirens, and to just kind of as a standard practice get in the bomb shelter and then go back out when the sirens are off, and have that be like an everyday occurrence for your whole life basically. Where if you're living in Tel Aviv or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, I think a lot of people probably I don't know, I think life for Palestinians has probably sucked pretty hard for a while. Definitely in the last couple of years it's taken a turn for the worse. But yeah, I don't know. The point being though that Israel, basically they spend their lives on war footing, and they seem really good at some of these aspects of fighting wars.
Yeah. It's a completely different mindset from us.
Yeah.
And I've heard people talk about growing up during the Cold War in a similar way of like being scared of like watching videos about how to prepare for a nuclear
Yeah.
bombing, and they show what happens and like where you should go, like nuclear fallout, stuff like that. If you're in an environment where you're constantly under threat, your view of the world is going to be extremely different.
Yeah. And if one other important point to make, that's going to be true even if the threat is it's about perception.
Uh-huh.
So like even if maybe someone on the other side of it would say that you should not feel that threat. It's like if you do,
Yeah, I mean, it
you're
doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah.
Like if you feel that way, then yeah.
Yeah, and I made the point that I think this might have actually been in the tweet, but Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's this very I think leftist writer,
Not Nazi Coates.
no, I might be saying his name wrong, but Ta-Nehisi or T-A-Nehisi Coates. He's an American writer,
Okay.
a black guy. He's a great writer. With whom many people love and with whom many people disagree very strongly. But he
Shocking.
but he said at some point since the Gaza conflict started that if he had grown up in Gaza, he doesn't know if he would have had the strength not to do some of the terrible things they did on October 7th. And this comment that he made in an interview prompted a heck of a backlash from some on social media. It's like, my gosh, how could you excuse these things? And it's like, I don't think that's what he's doing. I think what he's saying is actually fairly uncontroversial.
Yeah.
Which is that, like, if you grew up in Israel, I bet you would really not feel very positively about Palestinians or about Iranians or about whoever else. And then if you grew up in the Gaza Strip, I imagine you probably wouldn't feel that great about your Israeli neighbors. So you'd probably really not like them very much.
Yeah. I think people are delusional about certain things regarding themselves. Like, if I was born in Nazi Germany, I wouldn't have been Hitler's sons and daughters
Hitler
or
Youth.
something. Yeah, Hitler Youth.
Yeah.
And if I was in that psychological experiment where you shocked people, I would never shock people. I'm built different, and the truth is you're not. If you were born in India, you'd be an Indian. You'd think like an Indian.
Yeah.
That's just how it goes. If you're born in America, you are who you are. You are not an exception. If you're in Israel and you grow up that way, maybe you might have a propensity to think in a similar way. If you're a more peaceful person or whatever, you might think a little bit differently, but you are going to adopt the things that are around you.
Well, it was a solid, coming in hot, just a little bit under 2 hours. So.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, at least we kept it short.
Great job. Great talking to you. All right. And that was the interview. Thank you very much for listening. If you wouldn't mind, please do leave a review for the podcast. I believe those are important. And subscribe to the newsletter, which will be linked in the show notes, or can be found at neverclosetheinquiry.substack.com. Thanks.